No, but General Mehta, what I want to ask you, you're a war veteran. And in every war, there are losses which both sides incur. And to admit the losses, has it been so difficult in the previous years as it looks now that, the government cannot open its mouth? Why should we admit that we have lost out? Why should we admit that, our fighters have been downed? I mean, I just don't understand the logic and the politics behind it. Is it so difficult? And what have we? I mean, we've seen 1962, we've seen 1971, then we saw the Kargil War. The admission of losses, why does it become so difficult, especially once the war is over or the conflict is over? Or do you think that it's so difficult for Modi to acknowledge the losses just because he has given a clarion call that Operation Sindoor has not got over and we are still on, and he's trying to gain a political mileage out of it?
No, I think this is a fallacy. Why we conceal our losses? Because, you take the case Balakot, there was no concealment because Pakistanis came at you within 24 hours. Their counter strike came within 24 hours. They shot a MiG-21. We shot our own Mi-8 in friendly fire. We lost a pilot. It was all there in the open. Now, by concealing what we've got, Pakistan is saying we've lost 6 aircraft. Somebody is saying we've lost 4 aircraft. And
we saw the Vajpayee era also after the Kargil war. I think just within 3 or 4 days, the Kargil Review Committee was constituted. Why can't things like these happen in Modi regime? Is it so difficult, or they don't have the foresight to think on this line at this point of time because they're so busy taking the political mileage?
Firstly, if you have a review like this, which is again an error of judgment, that the government thinks that this is an admission of failure by having a review committee. By not having a review committee, it's hunky-dory, although it's totally different. We've had intelligence on operational failures, the initial attack on at Pahalgam. The terrorists have not been there, have disappeared completely, and subsequent terror attacks. And we've taken a number of steps, self-congratulatory steps. Whereas there is need, as we have discussed, for a review. And I think Operation Sindoor or the Pahalgam carnage is the right time to do this review and admit whatever the Chief of Defence Staff was talking about loudly in Singapore should be considered here. And the government should also learn how to assign missions. If the government is going to assign a mission which is warped, which is strategically not logical, strategically not rational, but because we want to show restraint, because we want to tell the world that we only are targeting terrorist attacks, we take these risks and lose aircraft. Now, you have to balance our responsible response, our intention not to escalate, our intention to be a responsible power, and balance it with the risks and the losses. After all, a Rafale aircraft costs $250, $280 million. It's not a small thing. So I think the government has to take a very cool, balanced view of this, examine how this counter-terrorism doctrine was framed in a great hurry while the blood was still boiling. And as the Prime Minister says, he had Sindoor in his blood. I think we should get the Sindoor out of our blood and we should think rationally and come up with a proper counter-terrorism doctrine that does not take the kind of risks we take. And I think it was ridiculous. The the uh, the initial response, the so-called responsible response, had escalation built in. Why did it have escalation built in? Because unlike in Balakot, after the strikes, we had told Pakistan, this is the end of our operation. We intend carrying out no further operation. The next day, the Pakistanis carried out their counter strike and did not escalate, so the matter was over. This time, after we had carried out our strikes, and people have not have failed to notice this, we added any Pakistan misadventure. In other words, if Pakistan responds to these strikes, we will respond correspondingly. Now, every breathing, thinking Pakistani knows, and every Indian knows, that Pakistan has to respond. Pakistan had to respond, and it did within 24 hours, and it suffered. It suffered a great damage to 9 or 11 airfields. But it kept the image and dignity of the force कि revenge लेंगे हम, बदला लेंगे, and they will not let a strike go unresponded. And they responded, and we knew it. So the escalation was built in.
Right.
And
But
telling
other thing, yes, one last bit on which I also wanted to ask you that CDS Anil Chauhan also said that 15% of the army's time went in tackling fake news. Now, does it also imply? I'm using the word IMPLY, that it's implied that he's saying that fake news came across as a challenge for the armed forces. Who would you blame now? Would you blame the Godi media channels for this? The kind of narrative which they played out that as Islamabad has been captured, Karachi has been demolished. If the CDS is saying that 15% of the army's time was spent in tackling fake news, then that's a big admission, and it goes to give a very sad commentary on the mainstream channels.
I think it's a whole of government mistake. After all, Mr. Vaishnav, who's the INB minister, they had issued a code of conduct, and they only targeted media which is not friendly to the government, which includes you, and which includes other channels who are not normally. I mean, I think I've used the wrong word, not friendly. You are critical of the government. And it's the job of everybody to be critical. Constructive criticism is very useful. But there are other channels who were talking about attacking Karachi. They were calling all kinds of names. I mean, I am ashamed of some of the veterans who were on these channels and talking very undignified. And therefore, I think the government should have really ticked off, wrapped them on the knuckle, some of these channels that were talking about reaching Islamabad or attacking Karachi. So a code of conduct is required, but more than that, we now have an integrated defense staff. We have a tri-service organization. We now need a department or an agency of information warfare, which must be ahead of the curve. It must, in this battle of narratives, it must be ahead and for example, for 15 days between the Pahalgam attack and our response, we were mum. There was no outreach, diplomatic outreach, barring, I think, one ambassador in London, Doraiswamy. Barring him, I don't remember anybody else saying a word. And we only got into action after the 10th, and our delegations are still out, whereas the Pakistanis were working on the phone much before we even thought of it. So they are always ahead of us for some reason or the other. And therefore, I think the CDS was right in saying that we spent 15 minutes of time countering this. If they had a proper organization, he wouldn't have said that.
Absolutely. So I don't know. I mean, and the worst part is that the CDS is being trolled for this kind of an admission that he's admitted to losses. So the right wing ecosystem begins to start trolling and questioning his competence. But how will the government now tackle this political battle? Because it's a new turning point again. And once CDS is back, once the multi-party delegations are back, how the government is going to handle all of this is something to wait and watch out for. Thank you so much, General Mehta, for joining on HW. Thank you, sir. Thank you so much.